Hi, I'm Sara Marks, the author of the 21st Century Austen series. For the next few months, while I'm working on Sweeten Up Ginny Darcy, I thought I'd share different content from the rest of the series, not just the prequel stories and excluded content that didn't work in the final version, but details about the actual production of these books. Things like who made the covers, who's acknowledged in the back, why there are Patreon collaborators in the front. But I want to start with behind the dedication, who these people are to me, and why the book is dedicated to them. Today I'm going to start with Unraveling Carrie Woodhouse, my latest release that just came out. At least when I'm recording it, it just came out. Unraveling Carrie Woodhouse is dedicated to my friends Pat and Christy. These are two people who have been part of my life for the last 15 years and two of my closest friends. If there are people who feel like you've always had them in your life no matter how long you've actually known them, these two people are some of them. I remember the night I met them both. At least, I think it's the night I met them both because my mind has combined one night or many nights into one night. But I remember it as the night I met both of them. You might know these people in different ways. One, Nicole and Doug were highly inspired by them, but so were Pat and Christy from Modern Persuasion. I borrowed their names, including Pat's now husband, Victor, to develop those characters. When I met them, I was living in Fitchburg, Massachusetts. It's this little city in the center of Massachusetts, north center part. I had moved there and not known anybody. If there is a difficulty in making friends as an adult, I know that difficulty. I keep doing it too, but it took me a few years to make any friends. And I started with a program called Toastmasters, which is a public speaking organization. I knew them from my past, and I thought this would be a good way to get professional development and meet people locally. And it worked, but it took a while. In fact, it took 3 years for me to make friends with anybody. The person I first made friends with, her name was Yvette. She is the one 11 Warren Woodhouse Hall is dedicated to. And we'll talk about her in another video. There was another woman named Judy. Judy was the director and had created a nonprofit organization called Warmer Winters. And in fact, in Unraveling Carrie Woodhouse, Warm Up New England is directly inspired by the work she continues to do in Warmer Winters. The group was knitting and donating the knitting and teaching knitting to people in order to create a collection of items that could be donated to those in need, especially in a cold New England winter, where a hat and a scarf and a glove can really make someone just slightly more comfortable while they have to sit outside. Yvette and I were both crafters, and when we met Judy and learned of the mission, we just jumped in, both feet not looking. It was one of those things where you just knew you had to be involved in something, and we loved it. I was at a point in my knitting where I had very few people who wanted things because they all had plenty of their own knitting and were knitters, but I had an obsession that needed more time, and I needed to do something with the projects I made, and I was broke, which was a routinely common thing for me in Fitchburg. So I needed yarn. And the more yarn I had, the more I could make and the more I could donate. And Judy was happy to provide all of that. She would give me the yarn. She would teach me anything I needed to learn, which was at that point working with the loom knittings. And we'll talk about that another day. The loom knitting was the fastest way to make hats, gloves, and even scarves. And I would then give her my finished projects. And if people donated yarn that she didn't like, I would turn it around into something pretty that she could auction off. Or I would make it into something bigger or warmer than she thought it could be. Judy also hosted a monthly knitting night at the church where she stored everything. People of all skill sets and all backgrounds came, and we worked together for a couple hours. Yvette and I have been doing it for a couple months when we walked in one night, and sitting on this floor was this perky, chatty woman who was talking about how she had just recently quit smoking. She was chatty and energetic, and I looked at her and I thought to myself, I want to be friends with this woman. I didn't know why. There wasn't anything specific about her, but she had this infectious giggle, and I knew that if I was going to make a friend my age, this was going to be the woman. There was another person, and I swear this is the same night, but they might disagree, and they're free to disagree with me openly in social media. The other person was a sarcastic, quiet man knitting by himself, but as soon as I saw him, I knew he was the other person. There are many parts to me, and sometimes I want the perky, giggly girl, and sometimes I want the sarcastic, quiet guy. Patrick was that, and I latched on to both of them. Patrick, by the way, a male knitter, is like a unicorn, and you know I love a good unicorn, so of course I wanted him in my life. We instantly bonded. We started just seeing each other at knit night, and that went on for maybe 2 months before we realized we wanted to knit a little more frequently. So the four of us would go to Starbucks, and Yvette would sometimes join us. Yvette was a lot to handle, and you'll learn that from the video I make about her. And I was good at handling her, but Christy and Pat didn't always want that kind of energy around. So sometimes we'd just not include her, and she came once a month or once every other week, and we saw her at the knitting night, and I did things with her separately. But the two of them, Christy and Pat, with me, we were a group unto ourselves. As we got more and more comfortable with each other, realizing we had so much that we loved in common besides fiber and knitting and crochet. Pat and Christy taught each other to crochet at one point. It was fascinating. I had no interest. I had too much to knit to learn crochet. We eventually started making our way to each other's homes, primarily Christy's, because I was living in this crummy little 600 square foot apartment in Fitchburg, which was poor. I recently had to go back, and I drove by my apartment, and it's the same except worse. The roads have not been repaved in 20 years, 12 of which I have been gone for, and 6 of which I lived there, and I'm positive they have not been repaved. And it was small. 600 square feet doesn't really fit anybody when you have a living space. Patrick was living at home with his parents at the time, and even though he lived geographically close to Christy, it was far more comfortable going to her house. Not only was it her and her husband and their pets who were enjoyable, there was a pool and there were movies and it was comfortable in the summer, and we just would start with knitting, and eventually we'd start ordering food and we'd watch movies and we'd get drunk, and it would be drunk knitting. That's how we learned that Patrick sings when drunk. But Christy's husband will pull out the guitar and make up songs when he's drunk. We started doing barbecues. Pat and I would bring out over the food, and Christy and Kurt would host us while we had a night together, playing Cards Against Humanity, or watching Doctor Who, or watching stupid YouTube videos. We did everything. We introduced each other to new media, to new books, to new shows, everything. And then things changed, because they always change. I moved out to Lowell and became a lot more financially secure. I could not contribute to warmer winters the way I had, and backed off. But I had my knitting friends. Pat moved to Worcester, which is south, and I moved northeast. So while Christy's place remained the center and the place we went to, we saw each other less and less frequently. Now we were going down to Worcester to have dinner with Pat and Vic, or we were coming up to me and hosting an adventure into one of the mills or a local yarn shop, because I seem to have found a bunch of great yarn shops when I moved up here. And over time, Pat moved farther out to Quincy, which is on the southern part of the coast of the state. And I became the center that Christy had once been, both of them coming to me to knit. And I was happy to host because, I mean, I had a much bigger place now. And like every friendship, it evolves. Over time and COVID, we stopped getting to see each other at all. We would do check-ins. We would sit during COVID on Google Chat and video chat with each other, catching up every so often. Sometimes it was harder. Sometimes there was so much for one of us to tell the others that nobody else got anything in. But we made a point, and we knew if we ever needed each other, all we had to do was ask. Sometimes we don't even have to ask, and the other two will be there. We call ourselves the Dirty Dancing Alpacas. This was born from something I learned in the early 2010s about how China's web users were protesting censorship by using this dancing alpaca GIF, or however you pronounce it. They were using it. It was, if you saw the symbol, you knew this was something connected to that. And I kept thinking, well, we're dirty. We're dancing. We're alpacas. Christy is our alpaca fan, so she's our alpaca. Patrick's our dancer. You get him drunk, he'll dance to Lady Gaga or Madonna on the beach, in your house, in his own house, over video, live in person. And I was the dirty mind. So we've been calling ourselves the Dirty Dancing Alpacas ever since. We have adventures we've taken, photo books I made one year of all the things we've done. Patrick crocheted this cute little white doggy. We call him Toxic Rocket. This was before I got Cedric, before Christy got 2 dogs, and one of her older one, passed away. We thought he was the greatest. He came with us all the time. We have pictures of him in Lowell. We have pictures of him in New York, in New Hampshire. Wherever we went with that little dog, he had an adventure. And we all have these memories together. And we're not done. COVID's over. We're getting back to normal. We're getting back to our new normal. And it's now time to consider our priorities. But no matter what that looks like, the 2 of them are memorialized forever as those I dedicated Unraveling Carrie Woodhouse to. Because Carrie would have her dirty dancing alpacas if she knew they existed.